Five Nights at Freddy's has some of the most complicated lore ever, with evolving timelines through the games, books, and movies. Since FNAF 1, people have made so many theories on the lore and characters, but most are debunked by this point. With how much the FNAF games add or make changes to the lore, a lot of theories have aged bad. But what about the theories that stood the test of time? I hope you're having a great day. If not, I hope it does get better. Today, I'm going to cover FNAF theories from early theorizing that aged well. They might not be 100% correct because there's very little in Five Nights at Freddy's that is confirmed, but are theories that are now popular today or are commonly used as foundations for other FNAF theories and timelines. There are also niche theories on this list too that I think have aged well in the broader context of FNAF or are discussed a lot here on YouTube. So there's a chance you might not even have heard of some of these. This video was actually requested by someone in the comments, so thank you for the suggestion. If you're new here, welcome, and thank you for tuning into the channel. Foxy did the bite of 87. Recently, FNAF theorists put together that the most likely culprit for who did the bite of 87 was actually Foxy all along, using evidence from the FNAF book the week before. About 11 years ago, a YouTuber named Demos predicted that Foxy was the most likely option in a YouTube video covering the topic. The culprit has changed a few times over the years, going from animatronics like Mangle to Freddy and so on, but it seems like the common consensus right now online is that Foxy did it. So to see an 11-year-old prediction aging well is pretty cool. Puppet revenge. In MatPat's FNAF 2 video, he would explain that the puppet likely wanted revenge for being killed by William Afton, at the time Purple Guy, and that would be their motivation for bringing the children back to life in the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame. A lot of details were wrong in this video, likely because named characters like Charlotte Emily didn't even exist until later, but there's a part of this that aged really well, being the idea that the puppet wanted revenge. Throughout the games, this isn't explicitly highlighted. Instead, other characters like Cassidy are theorized to be more consumed by revenge. But in the FNAF 2 movie, this is a huge motivation for the character. The puppet is such an interesting character, and to see them being more of a main focus in the movie was a really cool surprise. In the movie, Charlotte had tried to get the adults' attention in order to save kids who were actively being murdered by William Afton in the spring Bonnie suit. Much to her surprise and some audiences, the adults didn't seem to care, and she is fueled by rage ever since, not only on William Afton, but also on the adults of the film. This is a side note, but these scenes were heavily criticized in the movie for being unrealistic. It might be cope, but in a lot of writing, often the narrative is framed subjectively through the eyes of the protagonist. A wild example is Fight Club, where the narrative uses the unreliable narrator trope. What the writers might have been going for was for the audience to see this event through Charlie's warped point of view. Of course, through her eyes, their actions seem unrealistic and exaggerated due to being seen through the mind of a child. I think where the film might have struggled in the execution was deciding to not frame the entire film in this lens, instead to only have this scene being through her perspective, and later having Vanessa telling her that being angry isn't really getting her anywhere. And so the point of view shifts to the more reasonable character, and because of the framing shift, the audience was left a little bit more confused. Regardless, this film clearly wanted to explore this direction, and I think it's setting up to explore character motivations more intently in future films. Game Theory's FNAF Will Never End video. This one is mostly just the title, honestly. The FNAF games are being run by Steel Wool now, and there's no end in sight. But even earlier on, the games kept trying to end, but Scott Cawthon would apparently change his mind and keep it going. FNAF 1 was supposedly meant to be his last game, and FNAF 3 would be his original ending. Then FNAF 4, and so on. One after two. This is the theory that FNAF 2 is actually a prequel, which is something that was a huge point in MatPat's FNAF 2 video. He would use minimum wage calculations through the paychecks given to the player in order to determine the earliest foundations of the timeline of Five Nights at Freddy's. I think this aged well for a lot of reasons. Not only would this information be used to create timelines and the idea of structuring the narrative in timelines, which is a very popular format now across the fandom and YouTube videos and posts in other circles. But it also aged well as it's one of the only really explicitly confirmed theories in the lore. Lore confirmations range from either being implications or a convoluted puzzle. Also at the time, there was still discussion over this and which game came first. BV83. Bite Victim 1983 is the theory that this scene in FNAF 4 takes place in 1983. A lot of speculation would be discussed over if this was actually the bite of 87, but others would theorize that this was actually taking place in 1983. The disagreements weren't outrageous at the time due to the bite of 87 being mentioned by Phone Guy, and then it never being seen on screen, and yet this one is shown in full detail. Also, that clip of Markiplier. Charlie Bot. Charlie Bot is a book-specific theory in the Silver Eyes trilogy, where it would be revealed that Charlotte Emily was actually a robot created by her father, Henry Emily. who made robotic clones of her in different stages of her life. While this is only in the books, the inclusion of this seemed to influence theorizing in later games, where channels like Game Theory would predict the characters like Gregory would actually be a robot. While this is pretty interesting, a lot of FNAF fans didn't really care for these theories. FFP83. This is the theory that Freddy Fazbear's Pizza opened in the year 1983, which was theorized in Game Theory's earliest videos on the topic using the minimum wage calculations. While I don't talk about the evidence too much for these theories to save myself the headaches, I have to talk about one of the pieces of evidence used to confirm this on the wiki, which are Faz tokens. On the Faz tokens, it says the date 1983, and thus plays a vital role in confirming some of the earliest theories. FNAF is so unserious sometimes, and I honestly love that. Freddy Boy. Freddy Boy is one of the earliest theories in FNAF that would beat Freddy Girl, another popular theory, though in retrospect there was a lot more evidence for Freddy Girl, but to be fair, one of the pieces of evidence was one of his sound effects having girl in the file name, so maybe people were just reaching. This would be confirmed when the child who possesses Freddy would be revealed in the Lore Keeper ending in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Sim, being a boy named Gabriel. Haunted Arcades. Haunted Arcades is the theory that the minigames that you play in the FNAF universe, like the Give Gifts, Give Life minigames of FNAF 2 and so many more, are actually games in universe, somehow being shown to us. It's explained in the book Ticket to Fun Ephemera Kit, where there's a quote, glitch with no current fix, end quote, that shows us messages on the screen, and this is a reference to those minigames we play starting all the way back in the earliest games. This theory aged really well. There was speculation that there was more to those minigames even back in the early theorizing space. I remember some people talking about how it's the Puppet or Golden Freddy showing us the minigames to tell us who is responsible for the missing children's incident. Regardless, that was some of my favorite parts of those early games. The 8-bit style was visually really cool, and I like it when media explores different styles to tell their stories. It's cool to think that this visual style and inclusion in the games could be explained by lore reasons. Jane lived. This is a movie-specific theory, and it's a theory that the aunt who tried fighting Mike over Abby in a custody battle actually survived her encounter with Golden Freddy. This is confirmed by the second movie, where they say she just ended up being institutionalized. It was left ambiguous in the first movie, where only her legs were visible, and the boy who possesses Golden Freddy just said she was sleeping, but a lot of people interpreted this as being a lie. This doesn't change too much, but does reveal an interesting character detail that I find pretty cool. When you watch the first movie, by this point you're rooting against the animatronics, as they are framed as the antagonists wanting to get Abby to join them by killing her. But by the second movie, we empathize more with them because they were just kids who were scared and under the influence of William Afton. So it might be small, but this little detail shows that Golden Freddy isn't a character who just kills people who gets in his way, and this adds a little bit more depth to him. Also, it paints the kids in a more positive light, which sets up the finale of the second movie. Obviously, they have killed before, such as the night guard shown in the intro of the first movie, but I wonder how intentional this detail was because of its inclusion. Michael SL. Michael in Sister Location is the theory that we play as Michael Afton in Five Nights at Freddy's Sister Location. This was confirmed in a cutscene that's unlocked when you beat the Golden Freddy Custom Night Challenge, where the technician says he's William Afton's son, being Michael. There's also a sticker that says Mike on the hand unit, suggesting that Michael typically goes by Mike in other games. Random Mike Dad. This is just a theory that Mike Schmidt's dad in the first FNAF movie was just a random person, which ended up being true because he's never talked about outside of the flashbacks, even in the second movie. To be fair, I guess he could end up playing a larger role in the future, but the main reason for this theory aging well is because another theory being debunked. There is a popular theory that they would have Michael be Henry Emily's son instead of William Afton's as a plot twist, and that would draw a further connection between Mike and William Afton. But this was debunked when Henry Emily was introduced in FNAF 2. Will Trap. Will Trap is a theory that William Afton is Springtrap, and this was a divisive debate due to the conflicting theory of Mike Trap. The final nail in the coffin was in the end credits in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza Simulator, where Scrap Trap is referred to as William Afton. There was a lot of evidence throughout the earlier games, however, and even outside the games when Scott Cawthon would comment on the Mike Trap theory. Ultimately, this was a theory that ended up coming out on top and totally deserves a spot on this list. Also, narratively, it makes so much more sense for William Afton to be Springtrap, and I especially like the parallels he has to Mike as a result. Both William Afton and Michael are undead to an extent, and both were represented by purple guy sprites, which led to so much confusion, but now that that's over, it's nice to appreciate how similar they are. What's cool is that William Afton ended up getting spring-locked and trapped inside the animatronic as a result of his sins and arrogance, while Michael ended up being scooped and had the animatronics inside of him as a result of debatably altruistic intentions in trying to help Circus Baby. There's a lot of these cool little parallels that people have pointed out over the years, and I think looking back, that could have been what Scott was going for, but it's hard to say. Purple Guy is the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment. In a post made about 11 years ago, Reddit user Dawko ZZS8 talked about an original theory of theirs that speculated that Purple Guy is actually the CEO of Fazbear Entertainment. They made some pretty unique points. I like how they actually gave a reason for Purple Guy to be purple. In their posts, they analyzed the color and talked about how it represented wealth, luxury, and ambition. They note this as being intentional, especially with the emphasis of his purple car. See, in their interpretation of events, they painted Purple Guy as being a money-hungry CEO, that while they described him as crazy, seemed to be motivated more by money. This is a pretty cool interpretation, as it implies that the murders are more so a means to an end, and the post cites a Fnaf 2 minigame, which would be later revealed as Charlie Emily's death, occurring because a child crying outside is bad for business. However, in the post they didn't provide a detailed explanation for the missing children's incident. They only said it was due to supernatural events. A big piece of speculation that they draw from is the idea that the company seemingly keeps the CEO safe from investigation and from getting caught, because otherwise they wouldn't get paid. And it seems to present the Purple Guy as this wealthy man, and that was the reason they even had the budget for the animatronics. This theory says that while Purple Guy is a crazy murderer, the whole company is corrupt and are accomplices to an extent. This even includes the phone guy. I really like this theory, especially under the context of when it came out. This was at the time when everyone thought that the Purple Guy was the phone guy, and the post even gives some counter arguments for that. It seems that this user received a lot of negative feedback. A lot of their comments under the post are downvoted into the negatives, which could be due to the arguments they had with other users. At the top of their post, they say to credit their YouTube channel if you share the theory, but the link doesn't go anywhere, and they even made a video explaining this theory further that is no longer up. If I had to guess, the negative feedback could have resulted in the video getting taken down, which would be unfortunate. I tried looking for it in the Wayback Machine, but I couldn't find anything, unfortunately. It's pretty common for FNAF theorists, both creators and commenters, to be aggressive in comment sections until they're wrong and move on to the next popular theory. And it's sad if this is what resulted in the video getting deleted, as this ended up aging really well all these years later. Also, old FNAF videos are pretty fun to watch regardless. Eventually, Purple Guy would actually end up being revealed as William Afton, who is the co-founder of Fazbear Entertainment. Yeah, not all the details were right, but story-wise, I really enjoyed their reasoning. And the color purple would also end up being a detail used later on, as reversing the color would reveal a connection between Purple Guy and Springtrap in FNAF 3. This also wasn't the only Purple Guy CEO theory. They started popping up every so often in the following years, but this is one of the earliest ones I found. You play as a night guard who gets bitten in 1987 in FNAF 2. This is a theory from a YouTube video uploaded by Demos back in 2014, where he talked about FNAF 2 fan theories. While this probably wasn't the first time mentioned, early theorizing around this topic would age well in a lot of FNAF timelines covered today. In FNAF 2, we play as Jeremy Fitzgerald for the first 6 nights, and later, it was heavily theorized that the person we play as for the later nights, Fritz Smith, is actually an alias for Michael Afton, but that's besides the point. This theory stated that Jeremy Fitzgerald is a victim of the bite of 87, which would strangely result in him living the incident, but just without his frontal lobe as confirmed by the phone guy. The thing is, while this seems very likely looking back, due to FNAF 4, a lot of theorists around the time believed something different. A popular theory was that the cutscene with the crying child getting bit by Fredbear was the bite of 87, which complicates things. It seems that after theorists figured out that the FNAF 4 cutscene was the bite of 83, this theory became a lot more popular and resurfaced. Timeline-wise, it would match up, especially when using the phone guy's inclusion in the story, and would give a reason for there to be someone else taking over his shift. Strangely, while the bite of 87 is more known than the bite of 83, at least by name, strongly due to the Markiplier clip, and it's also repeated use in FNAF 1, and even there being constant references in the source code of FNAF games repeating the number 87, is never explicitly shown on screen, which is definitely a writing choice. This might be a hot take, but the bite of 87 isn't really all that important to the timeline, it seems, at least compared to other events like the missing children's incident. It has a lot of theories around it, but in terms of story, all it really boils down to is off-screen world building, which is cool when setting up the atmosphere, like in FNAF 1, but it feels like one of those things where the hype around it is more important than the actual detail. Which, while it might sound like I don't like it, I think having stuff like this is important for a horror story like Five Nights at Freddy's. What it does is it creates mystery, which is important because people tend to be scared of what they don't know, and the further you go down theorizing, the more interesting it tends to get. And I think a potential reason for that are these unsolved events. There's just enough puzzle pieces around this event to get a decent interpretation, but the gaps leave people to add their own unique spin on it, which I think is awesome because sometimes a person's own imagination can end up being more compelling to them than what they see on screen. Circus Baby is a crying child's sister. In Game Theory's sister location video, released in 2016, MatPat would suggest that the Circus Baby animatronic was possessed by a girl who is a crying child's sister. Now, while this was heavily implied in sister location, this video was released before the game came out, using teaser images, trailers, and previous games. This wasn't the only theory in the video, and I'll cover another one here in a bit, but this one specifically aged ridiculously well. Up until this point, an unsolved mystery was who the girl's room in Fnaf 4 belonged to, which led to a lot of theorizing. By the way, just for future reference when I talk about Game Theory's videos, I'm probably going to use MatPat and Game Theory interchangeably, but that's not exactly accurate because they are a team of people. MatPat from the beginning wasn't working alone. Not only had Stephanie also worked on the videos, but so do other people like editors and writers. I just don't have a complete list and timeline of who worked on what. Anyways, MatPat predicted that it could have belonged to the pigtail girl also in Fnaf 4. He got to this point by using the colors of the dialogue text to piece together who said what, and even used FNAF World as evidence, which now wouldn't hold up because the game isn't canon. But because of the desk guy and the animatronic baby's inclusion in the game, it led MatPat to draw connections between Pigtail Girl and Circus Baby. He also mentioned how similar their designs were, which is also a neat detail that aged well, because some theorists have put together that Circus Baby's design was likely based on Elizabeth Afton's. Watching this part of the video now, there's a lot of comments like this that would age really well, even if the use of the evidence wasn't necessarily accurate. Probably the biggest part of importance was MatPat's reasoning that this is why sister location is called sister location, and how it's a double meaning not only for the Freddy Fazbear franchise, but also for Circus Baby being possessed by the sister of the crying child, who is an important character in Fnaf 4. This was a super cool theory to explore. I really enjoyed the reasoning and evidence being put together. I really forgot just how convoluted the pieces of evidence could get in Fnaf. Though this could have easily been one of those things where you get the wrong formula to get the right answer. But I don't know, maybe Scott, Cawthon, and Game Theory were on the same wavelength for a bit. We're talking about the actual storytelling. I think this is some of the best parts of FNAF. Clearly at some point, Scott wanted the story to be about the Afton family. And when we get to actually learn more about these characters, it's really interesting because there's a lot of thought put behind their character writing. It's just the way that we get the context needed to actually understand who characters like Circus Baby are. It's just a little convoluted, even after Sister Location came out. Also, cool little bonus, at 1351 in this video, you can see a ball pit image which MatPat's PNG character jumps into, which obviously doesn't predict the, FNAF Into the Pit game, but since I've been rewatching a lot of old videos looking for stuff that aged well, I thought this was a really cool detail. Sister Location takes place in a rental facility. In the same Game Theory video, there was also another theory that would age really well, being that Sister Location would take place in a rental facility that rents out animatronics. At the time, because the game wasn't out yet, plenty of people assumed that it would take place in another restaurant, because, Sister Location, or even an underground club. But there's actually some pretty cool evidence that Game Theory used to piece together that would actually be some kind of rental warehouse of sorts. On Scott Cawthon's website, there was source code discovered to be showing repeated numbers that could be interpreted as booking days for the new animatronics. To go along with this, Reddit user MagicCraftCat discovered that Scott actually copyrighted the names of the Funtime animatronics, and weirdly one known as 0500S. Anyways, in the video, they break down some sort of schedule for renting times for each animatronic, leading to the prediction that instead of a restaurant, the sister location is more of a storage place for the animatronics, which I think is pretty cool for a couple of reasons. Not only does it distinguish itself from the other games, where it could have just ended up being a reskin of FNAF 1 or 2, with different animatronics, but it also adds to the world building and shows how services like this exist. It's also pretty cool to see this theory aging well, and I find it insane to think about how this video came out before Sister Location was even out. Also in this video, Game Theory would go over the canonicity of the FNAF books and where they stand, specifically with the Silver Eyes novel, and the reason I want to bring this up is because it's Scott's official statement on it, which I somehow missed finding before. How canon the books are in relationship to the games has been a huge debate for a while, because while they do have separate continuities, people end up cross-referencing the evidence. Moving forward, Game Theory would use this statement to assess information on the books. I'll just leave Scott's quote here and let you decide. Quote, Sometimes the lore of something can become so crowded that you can't even tell an original story anymore. The games and books should be considered to be separate continuities, even if they do share many familiar events. The book is a reimagining of the Five Nights at Freddy's story. End quote. Hybrid animatronic, kind of foreshadowing and art. This one is a huge stretch, but a detail I found really cool in today's context, especially with how big the idea of the hybrid animatronic was in the fandom without necessarily having any information on it. In a video by Pretty Grumpy Bear released in 2015, she would go over tweets she received on people theorizing that instead of being a Golden Bonnie animatronic, what would later end up being Springtrap, it is actually a hybrid animatronic that is made up of different animatronics fused together, leading to the name Hybrid. In the video, Pretty Grumpy Bear would go over which parts of Springtrap, or the Springtrap animatronic, would correlate to whichever animatronic were fused together. This was before FNAF 3's release and at the time when the trailer was already out, so all people really had were the teaser images and some gameplay footage. The reason I included it on this list is because in Five Nights at Freddy's sister location, there would actually end up being an animatronic that is made up of different animatronics, called Enard. It would be made up of the different Funtime animatronics, and in the ending of the game would be scooped into Michael Afton, wearing his body until he turned purple. The Enard animatronic is an idea pretty close to what people were theorizing the hybrid animatronic was, and I don't think it's intentional, but it's still a pretty cool coincidence. Golden Freddy suit. In another video by Pretty Grumpy Bear, she would theorize that the Golden Freddy animatronic is actually a wearable suit, being the other one mentioned besides Spring Bonnie. This was theorized for a bit in other places too, and a good piece of evidence used is the FNAF 3 minigame, showing Fredbear and Spring Bonnie being paired together. A lot of people would also point out how visually the Golden Freddy animatronic suit would be similar to the Springtrap one when not activated, and how their poses are really similar, though this kind of falls apart with Wither Bonnie's pose in the FNAF 2 trailer. Anyways, in the video, she would cover how the Golden Freddy suit is also a spring lock suit, and this would age well in other media and games where people would wear a Golden Freddy suit. Though there is a lot of debate over if the suit is the same, with some people eventually theorizing that there would actually be different Spring Bonnie and Fredbear suits. Beyond it aging well, I think this is so cool story-wise with the parallel between Springtrap and Golden Freddy. Not only are they in direct conflict, but there are so many cool details between them across different theories. With the crying child possessing Golden Freddy, there's that shared fate of William Afton also possessing a Springlock suit, and so they share that in common. Honestly, it must suck being an Afton family member. Between the 2 out of 3 children getting killed in an accident with the animatronic, and Michael getting ratatouille'd from the inside by Enard, it's no wonder the mom left. Probably. She might be in Ballora for all I know. Anyways, Golden Freddy is also theorized to be possessed by Cassidy, or even another kid, but the point there is that there are some pretty huge theories that William Afton was brutal in the way he killed the kid that would end up possessing Golden Freddy, and so it's fitting for William Afton to end up springlocked and dying in a horrific way, also leading him to end up in a broken suit. I'm talking a bit broadly here. The theories around Golden Freddy and the souls that possess him are divisive, but even still, just the detail of it being a springlock suit that was paired with Spring Bonnie has so much storytelling potential, and I find it really interesting on top of this theory aging well. At the time, a detail that dissuaded many from this theory was the fact that Golden Freddy had 4 fingers. It's a pretty common piece of evidence that's used in these arguments, and people use that to explain that it couldn't be worn. Golden Bonnie. In 2015, Dawko posted a video talking about the Golden Bonnie animatronic that would later be known as Springtrap, and analyzed it, coming up with different theories. He talked about it being a Golden Bonnie suit, which might sound safe in retrospect because it aged well, as it ended up being a Spring Bonnie suit, but with so many people talking about salvage and hybrid, it was kinda drowned out by a lot of fans. A cool point to note is at 146 in the video, Dawko says it looks very glitchy, and repeats this word a lot, which isn't foreshadowing or anything, but it's pretty cool because there would end up being a glitch trap later on in the series. As I'm going through these old videos, I'm starting to notice a lot of these little coincidences, and I'll point them out, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything. They're just cool details that I wanted to include. Also in this video, Dawko points out how the jump scare sound doesn't sound like a child's, like in the previous games, just more of a whispering sound. Still human, he clarifies, but makes it a point about it not being a child. This aged really well, as when the game was released, it was Purple Guy who was revealed to be Springtrap, and ended up getting spring locked in the suit, which caused the possession to take place. Up until this point, common knowledge on the FNAF games was that the animatronics were possessed by children, and sure there were other theories, but suggesting that the Springtrap animatronic was an adult before FNAF 3 was even out, and being right, is pretty cool. Crying child is Purple Guy's son. This by no means was the only early crying child theory that says he's the Purple Guy's son, but I really want to cover this one because it's really interesting story-wise. Although the only thing that aged well is that the crying child is William Afton's son. In a Reddit post by user silverstripe_, made about 11 years ago, they would theorize that the child is the son of the Purple Guy, and that the bite of 87, in this interpretation being the crying child's death, caused by the bullies, would result in the Purple Guy luring the 4 bullies into a secret room, murder them, and stuff them into suits, causing the missing children's incident. The post then mentions how the crying child figures this out and forces his father into the suit, and quote, Springlock kills him. I just want to include this theory because while it's not the most accurate thing ever, not only does it make for a neat story, a lot of future theories would mention how the bite of 83, the actual date of the crying child's bite incident, was the catalyst to William Afton starting to murder children for a wide range of reasons. A popular theory is that William Afton wanted to understand Remnant after noticing signs of possession, and others say the incident drove him mad. But there's a few different interpretations, so you can just take your pick. Chica's cupcake is alive. I can't believe I'm talking about this, but according to a Reddit post covering old theories back in 2014, there's a theory about Chica's cupcake being alive or also possessed. And nowadays, there's a kind of reasonable theory that the cupcake could also be possessed by Susie's dog. Honestly, this would be wild, and with how the movie fails to even address what the cupcake is, I'll take anything at this point. I mean, is it part of the Chica animatronic? Is it also possessed by the same kid, but it's like a robot minion? I don't really know. I wouldn't even mention it to begin with, but the cupcake was a menace in the Fnaf movie, directly leading to William Afton getting Springlock. So, I don't know, it'd just be interesting to get some kind of direct answer, at least in the movie, for sure. The animatronics think you're a killer. In the very first game theory video, MatPat would theorize that we were playing as the killer who was responsible for the missing children's incident. And there would be many theories afterwards that would add or change details, but all revolved around the idea that the reason the animatronics were trying to attack you in the games was because they recognized you and were trying to get revenge. Now, while later theories revealed that we played as Michael Afton in the first game under the name Mike Schmidt and not William Afton, who was responsible for the murders, there would later be a cutscene in Sister Location where Michael said, "They thought I was you," possibly referring to when he visited the FNAF 1 location, and implies they did actually think he was the killer and could have been hostile towards him because of that. Between then, it was a bit complicated lore-wise, especially with the whole Mike Trap and Will Trap theory debate, but this monologue in Sister Location would basically serve as an explanation for Michael being there and being attacked while at the same time not being the killer. Now, while the placement of Sister Location on the FNAF timeline is still debated here and there occasionally, assuming it takes place after FNAF 1, this would make perfect sense and would make the original reasoning for why the animatronics attack you age pretty well. And interestingly, further points similarities between Michael Afton and William Afton, who are both represented by a purple guy sprite. Inconsistencies like this can sometimes be annoying to theorize with, and even more annoying to try to understand as a viewer or reader. It could be reasonably argued that the lore of FNAF, especially early on in the first 4 games or so, changed a lot with some retcons, and this could explain the sprite inconsistencies and other issues with the lore. But for the sake of these videos, I'm just going to ignore that because that's boring and isn't as interesting to me, especially because apparently Scott's 1 retcon isn't confirmed or anything. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it was just a troll. Instead, I think inconsistencies like this could just be plot holes, which, while not a satisfying explanation, does make the most sense to me, especially with how Five Nights at Freddy's communicates its story, because of like its weird delivery of the lore and everything and the hidden stories or whatever. I think just a lot got lost in translation or was just really rushed or made up last minute. At the same time, it does seem like with every game, even from what I've heard about of The Secret of the Mimic, they are constantly recontextualizing everything in prior games. Honestly, I haven't kept up with FNAF after Steel Wool took over. I tend to just stick with the games and lores from before then because I find it more interesting. But let me know in the comments if the lore in future games is something you want to see as well. Anyways, I do like this theory a lot, especially with what we know from Sister Location. I feel like it gives Michael more to do, and at the same time preserves William Afton as this mysterious figure whose actions are felt by the surrounding characters. It wouldn't feel right being able to play as William Afton, even though we might have in that one minigame, and I really enjoy hearing the lines from Michael's voice actor, so to give them this much weight in theorizing is really cool. Also, under the interpretation that Michael is a more morally good character who's trying to fix the wrongs made by his father, I felt so crushed of Michael's delivery of the line, "They thought I was you," because a trope I really like is a son trying not to become his father due to the trauma of their upbringing. This comparison being made, especially by the victims of his father, would probably cut really deep. Even if Michael is a morally gray figure, it's clear by the end of the scene he is now going after his father, and this is some of my favorite writing in FNAF. Speaking of Michael potentially not being all that good, Mike Accomplice. Okay, so I did actually include this theory in a different video where I covered theories that aged bad, but I had finished making that original video before the FNAF 2 movie came out by like 5 days or something, so I just indirectly got mad patted all these years later, which honestly I'm not even mad about. Michael Afton's reveal in the movie was crazy to see in the theaters. I almost put the two killers theory on this list too, but I'll save that for later because we don't really know how involved movie Michael Afton was in the murders committed by William Afton. For context, probably due to the magenta and purple sprite in the FNAF minigames, and also under certain interpretations of Sister Location, there were theories about Michael Afton having helped his father in his murders from the missing children's incident and other crimes. The extent of this ranges from certain interpretations of the two killers theory, where Michael could have also committed the murders, to just Michael doing his father's bidding in order to help him. But I had just at the time thought that he was more so searching for answers and going along with his father just for that. Personal biases aside, it's revealed that in the movie, Michael Afton is not a great guy, which, regardless of audience reaction, proves this early theory right in the continuity of the movies. It also makes another theory age well, being that Mike Schmidt and Michael Afton are different characters, but in the games it's much more likely they are the same, using evidence from the logbook, FNAF 4, and Michael being referred to as Mike in Sister Location. Anyways, despite being wrong and despite the mixed reaction to this, to say the least, I actually kind of like this. Flawed characters, I think, are more interesting to watch. There's that common thing about villain characters or morally gray characters being more fun to write and can be more compelling to audiences than characters who are fully good. Examples like this are Zuko from Avatar and Jinx from Arcane. And I don't think this is always the case, but at least from personal writing experience, I think it's just because it can sometimes be challenging to write flaws into hero characters, whereas in characters who are under less strict writing limitations, writers can have more options when exploring character motivations and flaws. Broad generalizations aside, I think specifically for the movie timeline, this could work pretty well. I'm curious to see where they take the character from there, but yeah, in retrospect, it kind of feels forced, at least to me. But in future movies, now that the character is established, I would like to see him go through some sort of arc where he might be an antagonist, but faces off against his father. All I know is a Sister Location movie would go crazy. This is definitely just me being excited for future movies, but I just see so much potential with all the set pieces they set up in FNAF 2. What it also does is briefly touch on the theories of how William Afton cares about his kids. When discussing the will care theory, I've seen speculation of people saying that he really only sees them as tools or extensions of himself, and I think it's pretty cool to have Vanessa break away from this where Michael fully embraces it, either to seek approval from his father, or just because he enjoys murdering people. He does seem a little too happy when the crew at the beginning of the movie were slowly getting picked off. Like, he's definitely his father's son here. The movies at this point are very different from the games, and it's cool to see a surprising amount of early theories getting referenced, even if indirectly. Bite Nightmares and FNAF 4. Under a FNAF 4 teaser mega thread on the Finance of Freddy subreddit, user Clark Meister would comment, quote, "Wait, the human body can survive without the frontal lobe. The Bite of 87. Nightmare. If you were a person who was attacked by a rogue robotic entity and left permanently brain damaged from, what would your nightmares be about?" End quote. Before I talk about why this is interesting, I need to mention why this wouldn't be too accurate for a couple of reasons. The biggest being that the bite that would be revealed when FNAF 4 came out was the bite of 1983. But small stuff like that aside, Game Theory would also post a video about how people who do have their frontal lobe damaged wouldn't have nightmares due to the functions of the frontal lobe, which I found pretty interesting, and I wanted to mention it briefly. That was like one of the only times Game Theory made like a more scientific based video about Finance of Freddy's, and it was a cool video to watch, just in the middle of all their theories and stuff about FNAF. Speaking of Game Theory, this is also when they were planning to make a FNAF 4 video, but the game had came out as a surprise a bit earlier than what everyone had thought, and had messed with their upload schedule. In the video they did release afterwards, FNAF 4 got it all wrong. They would also cover how the teasers and source code of Scott's website repeated the numbers 8-7, referencing the bite, and the word nightmare over the teaser images themselves. I'm basically mentioning this to say that there was definitely more than one person predicting that the nightmare animatronics weren't real. Anyways, there would later be theories after FNAF 4 came out about how the nightmare animatronics in the games aren't real, and instead manifestations of trauma depending on who we play as. This theory specifically implies the bite victim has these nightmares, which there were many theorists, agreeing with after FNAF 4's release, but a more modern interpretation is Mike Dreamer, which the only similarity to the original post is the implications that the animatronics aren't real, but is still due to witnessing the actual event, which, with Michael being the brother who wears the Foxy mask and causes a crying child to get his head crushed by Fredbear, would definitely leave an impact. Besides the actual bite, Mike Dreamer is a theory that says that we play as Michael Afton during the nights of FNAF 4, which are basically his nightmares, and this could take place during his childhood or possibly during the events of FNAF 1 due to how the nightmare animatronics parallel the FNAF 1 animatronics. This part seems a bit less clear, but the stronger part of this is the reason a lot of people believe it's Mike that we play as, being due to the evidence in the security logbook, where Mike draws Nightmare Fredbear. Mike drawing that would just be a bit hard to do if he hadn't experienced the nightmares, especially if they weren't real. I'm not a huge fan of dream theories, especially when looking at FNAF games from a story lens. Yeah, it would give a good reason for the really cool nightmare animatronic designs, but FNAF has found creative ways in-universe to create these animatronics, so I would have just preferred that. Still, it's really cool how even before FNAF 4 was released, early concepts like this were being discussed and still are with evidence from the books. Dawko movie predictions. This one will be a bit quick because it's just some movie predictions, but I wanted to include on the list because of the insane amount of time the FNAF movie would be talked about before it came out. Back in 2015, around the time that the FNAF movie was first announced, Dawko, along with Razbowski, would talk about their predictions for the movie. And while not everything was right, like they doubted that the movie would center around the night guard job itself, and instead focus more on showing the killings, there are a couple things that did age well. For starters, they said that there would probably be a scene showing the night guard getting hunted out by the animatronics, even if it was only a quick reference. And while Mike Schmidt did serve as the protagonist of the movie did start with the night guard getting killed by the animatronics. They also talked about how they would probably change the design of the puppet to make it scarier, and this applies to the second movie, where the puppet itself didn't change, but it did have some unique designs when it possessed people. I have no idea why it looks like that. The puppet ends up possessing Lisa, one of the ghost hunters, Abby, and later Vanessa. The Abby possession kind of jump scared me, I'm not gonna lie, so I guess the scarier approach worked. Dawko and Razbowski also wanted it to look a bit more human, which, while the actual puppet isn't, the human puppets are about as human as you can get. Nightmare animatronics are different. In the FNAF Theory podcast uploaded on Dawko's channel in 2015, they covered a post where someone was talking about Nightmare Chica being the same animatronic as the other Chicas. And a detail Dawko, Razbowski, and BitGaming25 used to debunk this directly from the post was about Chica's nostrils, but in the video they also mentioned that Chica's head shape was a little bit different across the animatronics. They discussed this topic further, saying that animatronics are likely their own separate thing, which ended up being right, but they'd also talk about the similarities between the Wizards and the classics, which is still a topic still theorized about today. I wanted to include this on this list just because of someone using Chica's nostrils as evidence. The post was basically making a counter argument against the detail of the Nightmare animatronic Chica being the only one with nostrils, and that's really funny to me because while it seems a bit silly now, a lot of early theorizing would talk about very small design details like this and use it as evidence in terms of the broader lore. Another example I can think of is Freddy having bit a kid because of what people said was a handprint on its face. Bonnie is blue. This is probably the most controversial theory on this list, and after years and years of waiting, there's actual confirmation from Scott about this very important lore discussion. Before we get to that though, you know the whole glitch about people not being subscribed? Yeah, apparently that was real, so if you're interested in seeing more videos like this, check to see if you're subscribed, or if you're new here, consider subscribing to join our community here. Anyways, the topic of Bonnie being purple or blue has been a very heated debate since FNAF 1, with some people even bringing up the merch that was released. It was unresolved for a while with no comment from Scott, until the production of the FNAF movie came around and lead designer Robert Bennett was designing Bonnie, and had actually thought that the character was purple too. Apparently, Scott had noticed this and jumped in, saying he had been blue the whole time, and it was just lighting that made him look purple. I don't know why he didn't bother to mention this sooner. I mean, the merch does look pretty purple, even in artworks too, but apparently that was all just because of lighting. Watch this actually be Scott's one retcon. I don't know anymore. So for everyone who was on the side of Bonnie being blue, yeah, I guess you were right. but I still think that the dress is white and gold. Mike is the crying child's brother. In a series of theories posted on Tumblr and Steam in 2015 and 2016, there'd be a couple theories on Mike Schmidt being the crying child's older brother, being the boy that wear the Foxy mask. And since they're pretty similar, I'll talk about them both here. First, I'll read the Tumblr post made in July 25th, 2015, made by user at Fnaf Get Your Facts Right. Quote, in FNAF 4, the older brother could have become Mike Schmidt. This is backed up by both the fact that he would know about the original animatronics and the restaurant and has history with it. Also, the crying child and It's Me could easily come from the child being that of Golden Freddy, hence why Golden Freddy and It's Me is so active on FNAF 1 and not on the other games as much. And it also explains why It's Me is in front of Pirate's Cove too, since he wore the Foxy head so much. This goes hand in hand with the child being Golden Freddy. I don't need to say why, just saying that the evidence should come straight to mind if you've seen the FNAF 4 game. End quote. This wasn't the only theory using this evidence, as this would be a detail that's used later on in many other theories and timelines. It's actually kind of heartbreaking, at least to me. The crying child is literally calling out to his brother who was responsible for his death. And there are a couple ways to interpret this, but however you see this, it makes for a really cool detail and lore bit that only works if you know their siblings. This is just speculation on my part, but just using the knowledge that FNAF 3 was meant to be the original ending, or even FNAF 1 apparently being meant to be Scott's last game, I'm assuming that the original intent of the It's Me sign is just letting the night guard know that there's dead children inside the animatronic, and remove any doubt that it's just the animatronics acting quirky. That's really just a guess though, but to see this detail being used that way later on in the series is pretty cool regardless. I'm not sure how intentional the Foxy mask part was, but to give Mike more of a reason to be wearing that makes the It's Me sign a bit cooler. I mentioned this before, but despite the reaching, the lore in Five Nights at Freddy's can have some really interesting writing like this, whether intentional or not. But because you have to know the details and cross-reference the games and probably look up theories online, it'd be a bit harder to appreciate. The theories could all just be wrong though, so what do I know? The other post that theorized that Mike Schmidt is the crying child's brother was made by Hunter number 357 on Steam. They mentioned that this is a theory they saw elsewhere, but changed it up a bit. I'll just read it out here because it's super detailed and pretty interesting, though it's worth mentioning it's not totally original. Quote, after his brother got bitten, Mike went through therapy in a hospital as he was ever so slightly insane because he just killed his own brother, and he thinks it's his fault. He is sent to a hospital where he has nightmares about the animatronics and his brother. Meanwhile, Jeremy goes and gets a job at the new Fazbear's Pizza. There was an old one as a sister location to Fredbear's, so that he can discover more about the mysterious place. He learns about the killer robots firsthand and calls in Fritz, who also wanted to find out about the secrets of Fazbear's, to take his shift one night. Jeremy tells Fritz about the animatronics acting up, so Fritz tries to fix them in custom night, getting them both fired. Later, another smaller Fazbear's Pizza opens. Mike has been branded as rehabilitated and is persuaded by his friends to get a job there, as the company banned the other two from the grounds after what happened at the last pizzeria, so he goes there. Having hallucinations, It's Me everywhere, either because he imagines his brother being there, or he's fessing up to the bite. Anyways, he sneaks Fritz in, who messes with the animatronics again, and gets Mike fired. 30 years later, the friends had the idea to make an amusement park attraction based around Fazbear's. They managed to make an entire attraction, and even get hold of an old Spring Bonnie. They put Mike in charge of the night shift again, but he's forgotten almost completely about his brother at this point. Jeremy is the voice on the phone in FNAF 3 too. According to an old theory, the Freddy mask guy died, but I'm not so sure. I think that he's older than the others and has been working at Fazbear's for a while as the security guard and an actor. Yep, he's none other than the phone guy. He got separated from his friends after the bite as he didn't want to remind himself of the horrors of that day. He really liked Foxy, although Mike liked him even more, so he got the mask to the party. He records all the tapes for Fredbear's and is the guy in the Fredbear costume that's in the Night 3 minigame in FNAF 4. He worked at FNAF 2's pizzeria before Jeremy and Fritz, and sends messages to them every night. He then works again at FNAF 1's pizzeria and records messages on his week there, where he ends up dying. Anyways, that's the theory, edited massively but keeping the same point relevant, which is Mike, Jeremy, Fritz, and Phone Guy were the bullies in FNAF 4. I think, anyways. End quote. Theories like this are some of my favorite to read because they go beyond just talking about the evidence and use it as a base for an actual story, although I'm definitely a bit biased. Like, yeah, don't get me wrong, details are inaccurate, it's still debated on who the bullies actually are, excluding Mike. And from what I've seen, everyone has their own interpretations. But I like the creativity of the storytelling FNAF theories like this. Anyways, about the actual theory, I like how it uses the characters that are established in a neat way, and giving them all an actual reason to be there. One of the only things that age well, at least in terms of future theory crafting, is Mike being the crying child's brother, but this theory attempts to give motivations to each of the characters' inclusion, and also gives more significance to the bullies in FNAF 4, which is a breath of fresh air. I feel like in FNAF, and honestly a lot of other media, when it comes to sequels or continuations, new characters are really just there for the environment more so than any real story beat. Making the bullies more fleshed out by making them the other established characters, I think is a really cool way to build on the lore. Puppet is in Golden Freddy. So in a video posted in 2015 by Pretty Grumpy Bear, she covered a theory about the marionette being inside Golden Freddy. In terms of the actual theory itself, it was based off speculation using the animatronic cutscenes in FNAF 2, where Chica and Bonnie would stare at you, then eventually Golden Freddy would look at you, and then finally the puppet. In the theory itself, she shared the claim that the Fazbear Entertainment decided to destroy the animatronics at a previous location, and that the puppet had hid inside Golden Freddy in order to escape being scrapped. When Golden Freddy arrived at the new location, the puppet would be inside. She included the evidence of the eyes being similar, and in the cutscene itself, pointing out how Golden Freddy would stand in the same place that the puppet would, implying that the puppet wore it briefly and took it off. Okay, so obviously not a lot aged well, and this is a huge stretch, but as a comment under the video pointed out, this kind of predicted the main mechanic behind the Lefty animatronic in Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. In blueprints discovered in the game, the mechanics behind Lefty were shown and also revealed that the meaning behind the animatronic's name being to, quote, lure, encapsulate, fuse, transport, and extract, end quote. Also on the blueprints, the mention of the suit ceiling was used in the theories to put together that Lefty was used to capture the puppet animatronic in the game and keep it subdued with occasional electronic shocks and a lullaby, which the lullaby is also used for the puppet in FNAF 2 through the music box. I'm gonna generalize a bit because it starts to get a little complicated in the actual specifics, but basically in the game, Henry Emily was thought to have created Lefty and used it in order to capture the puppet possessed by Charlotte Emily, his daughter, locking the puppet inside of Lefty. I think it's cool that this pretty old theory aged well in terms of the puppet being inside of the animatronic, even if it's just one small detail. But like this next theory on this list, it's a bit surprising of how many of these coincidences exist in FNAF. Golden Freddy is a hallucination. This is another one that's more so just a random theory that aged well in a weird way, being actually including hallucinations in FNAF 3. There's sometimes still theories about this, but Golden Freddy was thought to be a hallucination the Night Guard would experience, as opposed to an actual physical animatronic. I guess there could also be arguments for the shadow animatronics, but I want to talk about Golden Freddy specifically. In FNAF 3, we do actually get hallucination animatronics in the form of the Phantoms. Whether they are real or not was still debated even long after FNAF 3 came out, but in universe, it's implied that they aren't real. Though whether or not that has anything to do with Springtrap or just a lack of oxygen was debated by theorists and a lot of speculation exists. Golden Freddy was always such an interesting animatronic to me. It's pretty clear that there is something different about this one even in FNAF 2, and compared to the others in the later games, something that's cool is that when he shows up in FNAF 1, he would crash your game as opposed to just taking you to the game over screen. So there's this paranormal emphasis on the character. Yeah, it makes sense for the character to actually be real, but I really like how Golden Freddy's abilities are undefined, and I would have liked to see an interpretation where it's more of a ghost or spirit than anything physical. Which I guess you can make the argument, it just wouldn't make sense to me based on how the other possessed animatronics operate. Also, to see this game sort of imply that the Phantom animatronics aren't real, or like the name suggests, might be ghosts, is pretty cool. I like it when FNAF takes advantage of this part of the horror in the games, and it can also make for some pretty cool designs, even when some of them look like a watermelon. At this point, I've come across a lot of theories like this that age well in a specific context when it comes to ideas on what the animatronics actually are. I wouldn't go as far to say that Scott took inspiration from the community all the time. It's just really cool that the earlier theories and ideas about what the animatronics could be would later end up being implemented in some way later on. I wanted to mention this on this list, and I think it falls under the vague term of aging well, even if Golden Freddy himself is real. So I made a post asking you guys what your theories were for Five Nights at Freddy's, just your own personal theories and ones that you wanted to include in a video, just as a way to like celebrate the road to 10,000 subscribers. I'll talk about that more here in a second, but I want to read out the theories. I like the headcanon that the MCI kids are that pissed off at Mike partially because he has some of their remnant in him from the scooping. Given that we know the scooper is also remnant injector, and assuming William is using the remnant infused parts of the toys in his experiments, I think it's a pretty solid narrative driven theory. Yeah, I'm always gonna like the narrative driven stuff a lot more than a lot of the evidence based ones that cross-reference the book and the books and even the movies, even though they're different canons, but like they're like the same story almost that borrows different elements. Like, as much as I'm probably gonna enjoy reading the books, I'm probably gonna have to start that soon just because there's a lot of theories that come from the books. I do prefer the theories that, although might not be perfect, are just more narrative focused and focus more on telling a good story as opposed to making sense of the complications of the FNAF lore. I think that, unfortunately, maybe I'll make a bigger video about this, but I think that, you know, in a lot of ways, a lot of FNAF theories are kind of assuming that the lore and like the evidence is perfect, and I think that just because, you know, there's some parts missing, it's not necessarily that we don't have all the right parts theory-wise. It could just be like plot holes existing or, you know, details having changed over time. But that's why I tend to like the more creative theories that might not be right, but like are still enjoyable to consume as stories. But that's why I like some of the creative theories. And I also like this one just because like it gives more of a reason for like, it just gives more agency to like the kids in the missing children's incident. They're like the main focus almost of like these victims of William Afton. But I don't know, they barely have any character besides like headcanons and stuff, to the point where like I'm actually enjoying reading headcanons just because it gives something to the characters at this point. I mean, even in the movie, like a movie that is supposed to like have a chance to have character writing, I barely know anything about the kids other than they were killed. Like you get a lot of implications and stuff. There's one good moment in the second movie where the kid who possesses Golden Freddy, or like who's representing Golden Freddy, kind of like shows that, oh, he's trying to be a hero at the end by like saying, oh, by the way, Mike, you know, I can't keep holding it forever, meaning that he has been holding back William Afton from coming back as Springtrap and like doing this basically sacrifice like throughout that entire time. Like that shows some character, but there's barely anything more than that, which I think a lot of theories fail to address just because they're focusing more about piecing the story together than focusing on what the story actually like is trying to tell. But yeah, I like the theory, and it kind of makes sense to an extent too. Although I'm a little bit confused about just like, the timeline of events, about when the scooping would actually happen and like when they would be mad at Michael. But I mean, I think that'd be a pretty fair thing to be mad about. I think they're just straight up mad just because like, oh wow, your father like kind of killed us. That's not the greatest thing in the world, you know? I like the one that says if FNAF 4 is crying child or Evan in a coma, well, FNAF World is his fractured mind/spirit after death and getting led to happiest day by the other child spirits. Brings a nice close story with FNAF Ultimate Custom Night and leading to the new story of AI being the new antagonist with the new characters as a protagonist, as well as the theory that the other bullies from the Bite of 83 might be coming forth again in the new games as fathers of the kids being affected by the Fazbear Co. as well. Yeah, to address like the first half of that, I do think that is one of like the better interpretations I've seen of FNAF World. Just that it's Evan or like Mike or Dave or like I don't know what the most up to date one is. I don't know. The Crying Child, right? The Crying Child. It changes like every 5 years. I guarantee you, like it's gonna change again. I mean, that's one of the reoccurring ones that everyone believes and is like die hard on. Like, oh, it's actually this. I swear it this time. But like at this point, I've seen it change like 3 times, and the same goes for like so many other things in the lore. So I'm not gonna believe anything until like either Scott says it or like we have the most up to date one, and then we'll just believe it. It's just kind of like a grain of salt type of situation. Regardless, the Crying Child being in like FNAF World, having his like, I think I covered a theory on this channel actually that was saying that FNAF World is like his transition into the afterlife and going through all the trauma and stuff after the event. One of the big pieces of evidence is that like the map itself of FNAF World is a brain, and I think that is a really cool detail. Also, just the inclusion of the Golden Fredbear plush, and even just like the ending. I know whenever you go through like the clock route and to get the clock ending, that is very connected. It seems like to FNAF 4, or at least when I played it. Even though it was such a frustrating, that was so frustrating to play that route. But anyways, yep, I could totally see this like being something, and also it gives like a better reason for FNAF World to be canon. I think I've like talked about this like earlier on that FNAF World is. I don't really see it as being canon. I know Scott said specifically that he regrets it being canon, and I think that implies that it's just not really seen as canon anymore. I know a lot of other theorists don't really see it as canon, but like a lot of people have mentioned, yeah, it kind of is. It's just that Scott like regrets it being canon. But regardless, it's kind of hard to explain away a lot of the meta elements in there, like not only Scott's inclusion but his older games, a lot of references to like the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise and such that I don't know, it just kind of gets weird. And I guess you can see it as a video game within the universe, but I don't know if I like those interpretations as much just from like a story perspective. I feel like at that point it gets a little too meta and a little bit too messy lore-wise. I do see FNAF World more as a love letter to the franchise, and I think that's like one of the best ways to look at it. Even if there are a few pieces of details that do contain lore, especially with the circus. Well, it's just the baby animatronic. I don't think it was even called Circus Baby at the time. But with the baby animatronic and the desk guy, there's a lot of cool little lore bits in there. I just don't think that all of it should be accepted as lore or whatever. But that's just me. I'm not a theorist. I just kind of cover theories that I like and I talk about the story elements. But like from a narrative perspective, I do think that FNAF World, it works better just as like a nice little addition to the Five Nights at Freddy's games and whatever, and it has all these little cool details and unique like references. Like if you've played the other games or just know Scott Cawthon's other work, I think it's really fun and like to go through and explore those details as opposed to just either playing the game regularly, because you're not supposed to play the game regularly. Maybe I'll like talk about it in a different video, but yeah, it's I kind of have a love-hate relationship with FNAF World in that I don't like playing it, but I can still appreciate a lot of the elements that it has. I personally believe FNAF 4 and FNAF 1 happen in the same day. At day, the FNAF 4 dreams happen, and during the night, FNAF 1 happens. I think this comment is referencing Mike Dreamer, just the idea that we play as like Mike in the first game, and that, you know, like the FNAF 4 dreams or whatever, are Mike's dreams, and you can kind of tell that based off like the animatronics are just like the nightmare versions of the ones he faces while he's like doing the night shift or whatever. And I think that's a pretty cool way to address that. I'm like I said, I'm not a big fan of dream theories or whatever, but this would be one that I think is more fitting. And I do see Mike Dreamer as a theory becoming more popular, especially around just interpretations of FNAF 4. Because it's kind of hard to explain away the nightmare animatronics in a way that's like realistic. I think the other alternative was like some experiments, and it kind of, I might be messing this up, but it mentions didophobia from like the book and how it's like these experiments that William Afton is running. But yeah, I do like this theory, like to some extent. I think dream theories can be just a little lazy, but if you have like the intention of it to show just how traumatized Mike is, I think it pulls it off pretty well. And also it relates a lot to like the crying child and like that event or whatever, because Mike would probably be guilty or to at least an extent traumatized by that event. And so probably the mini games happening at the same time would show like just Mike thinking about it or whatever. But that would just kind of be based on your interpretation of if Mike is, you know, more of a good person, or if he's more of a morally gray, or even just unempathetic. Because in the movie and in a lot of early theories, Mike wasn't really seen as like a good person. People thought he was Springtrap or one of the killers or this and that. And I think that's the route the movies are going under. But even just then, there have been just a lot of theories and interpretations that don't paint Mike in the best way. But even then, I still think he would be impacted a lot through the crying child incident. I have a theory that we are just playing as just a normal employee in FNAF 1, because I see a few YouTubers saying that we are playing as Michael Afton in FNAF 1, but that's just not possible. William destroyed and melted the FNAF 1 animatronics and died later that week after the location presumably closed. Then Michael goes to his sister location, and so onward. I don't know if this is a theory many people have thought of, but I just wanted to mention it. yeah, I'm not gonna focus too much on like the evidence in these series. Whenever I made this post, I don't exactly want to start arguments in the comment section or like cause other people to fight. Like that's not my intention at all. Just because like after covering all these series and whatever, like a lot of the evidence has changed and people are confident about like the wrong things, but it's only proven until like later. So I don't think there's any point in arguing like the theories to be aggressive with each other. I think it's a lot better. This might be just needlessly optimistic, but it just might be a bit better to just explore your own interpretations and say like what do you like about the other theories and maybe like what you don't like, but not like exactly to tear down other people's interpretations of events. Obviously, I have talked about theories I don't like the dream theory or whatever, but it's okay when I do it. It's just not okay. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, I'm just not. I just don't think it's worth too much to be able to like tear down the evidence or nitpick too much. So I that wasn't really my intention whenever I made this post. I think it's better to just I just wanted to see what your guys' thoughts and stuff was. But like to address the actual theory, I do think there is some merit in that. I keep referencing the movies, but like there was theories that Michael Schmidt and Michael Afton were different characters. I know that the name Afton didn't come out until like later, and it was only really in Sister Location where we found out like, oh yeah, they're kind of like the same person. But it's only really an implication because there's Mike on the hand unit, and then he's like, oh yeah, I'm your son, by the way, to his father. But even then, it's not like entirely out of the realm possibility that Mike Schmidt is just like a different character, because I forgot which interview this was with Dawko, but Scott Cawthon has said he reuses names and he like ran out apparently. I don't know how you run out of names. I think out of every like word possible, running out of names is kind of like a hard one to like kind of a hard issue to run into. But yeah, he's apparently like known for that and has like addressed that. So I could totally see that being the case. And I think that can still work too with just Michael Afton like going into the FNAF 1 location just off screen or whatever. I still think we play as Michael in the first game. It makes more sense to me at least. But I think since like there's a lack of character within the first game, it doesn't really change much if we just actually just play as Michael Schmidt, who's just a different guy or whatever. Although you do miss the important lore bit of him like being fired for having smelled bad, which I guess does add on to a lot of theories about Michael kind of being an undead figure, which I think is pretty funny. And I don't know if that's like intentional or not after the fact. Anyways, I do think it's interesting, and I do see that being talked about, especially after like the movie came out where it was like confirmed that they're basically the two different characters. I don't know if this really counts as a theory or if it's more of a headcanon, but I like to think that Jeremy Fitzgerald from FNAF 2 is the father of Jeremy the MCI victim. It explains why he keeps going back night after night to find out what happened to his son. I like this a lot because like I don't know, like facts aside, right? Let's just say that these are headcanons or whatever for the sake of just discussing the story. It gives way more reason for like someone who wants to work at like the night shift getting chased by the animatronics, like reasonably any worker getting paid like minimum wage or whatever, like you'd actually have to pay me so much more to stay at it. Like how like bad is the economy for you? Okay, well it's kind of bad right now, but like how bad like is your situation to where like you keep going back to work with like robots that are trying to actively kill you? Like just I'm sure McDonald's is hiring, I'm sure whatever is hiring. So to have like more of a reason to like have Jeremy Fitzgerald keep going back to work, I think it makes perfect sense. And it also just gives more of a like characterization to him and makes him more of like a, I don't know, not even a heroic figure, just like a reasonable one to like you're trying to figure out what happened to his son. And it's kind of tragic in a way, like that he ends up getting bit and meeting like a horrendous fate if that was like the reason and stuff. A theory I had from the Pizzeria Sim game is that the Midnight Motorist game might be telling a backstory for one of the kids from the MCI. Because in the same game, Pizza Sim, we found out about how Susie died, aka being lured by William. But what if the Midnight Motorist game was for another MCI kid? Like the orange guy that comes out of the purple car is actually the father of one of the MCI kids. I personally think it's Freddy. And he's pretty abusive. So the child escapes from home to go to Freddy's because it's their safe place to them, was lured by Freddy's by William because of the footprints. And it'd be very messed up because the orange man says the kid will be sorry when he comes back, but then the kid won't be coming back since he's dead. It doesn't fully make sense because of some stuff, but I personally make this headcanon in my own personal AU/timeline. Dude, I love this, especially as like your own AU. This it's just really tragic, and I mean, like, there's kind of like a whole like recurrent pattern of parents not like being very abusive towards their kids and stuff at this point, like throughout the games. And it's just, I don't know, it's tragic, and it has the level of element like, oh, you know, ending on a bad note, saying the kid will be sorry when he comes back, and then the kid doesn't. I know there's a lot of theories about this. A lot of them revolve around the purple guy being the orange man potentially, or just being in that scene. But I also really just like this note of William Afton using like the Freddy's as a safe place to like manipulate kids to like, I think it's just tragic that this place of happiness that kids use as an escape is being used to as like a trap basically from William and Jesus, Springtrap. He's using it to manipulate the kids who might just be seeking just, you know, escape from their own personal lives that aren't the best, you know. And then like they meet a tragic end because of William Afton. I think that just adds another level of evilness to William Afton's character, and also just like another layer of like sadness throughout like what happened to the victims. So yeah, this one's a pretty sad theory. I do like, story wise, there's a lot of good elements here for like NAU, so I do really like this a lot. It's pretty sad, and like a lot of the reasons give it, like, yeah, evidence might not line up or whatever, but like story wise, I mean, this goes hard. I think it's pretty good. So this post is still like up on the channel and stuff, so if you go over to the post tab, you can put in your theory, and maybe I'll cover it for a future video. I think that this will be a cool way to celebrate like milestones together. That way I can talk about your guys' theories without necessarily having to like talk about the evidence or whatever, or like go through arguments just like that people are going through in the chat. Like, I think it's a cool way to just share your own theories or headcanons or just details you really like about Five Nights at Freddy's. And like even your own earlier theories. I do think there's something so cool about revisiting a lot of earlier theories. I know that I've like made a few videos about it now, just you know, like a couple, like maybe like 1 or 2 or, you know, 3 about just early theories at this point, good and bad. And I don't know, I just really like just reading through them. And at this point, I'm going through quite a few. There's quite a lot that I've like gone through. But I think this would be a cool way to just celebrate little different milestones. We're basically like the road to like 10,000 subscribers. I mean, you guys are gonna like hit it soon. I think as I'm recording this, we're at like 9,800. So you guys are like amazing. I mean, you do the real work by hitting the subscribe button. I just kind of make these silly videos and put like Minecraft footage in the background. I do like the Minecraft footage. I'm probably going to keep that up. I have a couple ideas about how to make it a little bit better with like the Fnaf mod and everything. By the way, shout out to the creator of the Fnaf mod. The link to the mod will be in the description below. But yeah, I have a lot of cool ideas for the future and for like more Five Nights at Freddy's content. I have a couple more video ideas that I think you guys will be interested in. So if you want to stick around and see some more Five Nights at Freddy's content, make sure to subscribe. And yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day. And as always, I hope you're a bit less bored.